therapy corner. That camera looks like it's on the piss, doesn't it? That looks better.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. There's the first bloody problem I have to deal with on a Saturday.
So cricket so far behind everything else.
Pretty much.
Is the camera straight? Is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Essentially.
Right. And then I can bat.
Pretty much. So there's a really good example of what you have to go through when you're making content for cricket. But I've come down to the batting lab in Salisbury. If you're in the area, you fancy travelling down, amazing facility to come and have a go. It's 10 times more immersive than what you'd get against the normal bowling machine. But I'm here with Rich, owner of the batting lab, who through your ownership of the batting lab, you've developed this document, this thesis, this, I suppose, evidence of cricketers, amateur cricketers specifically, and their mentalities. I've got this goal of trying to score 100 this year. I thought it'd be a really good idea to have a chat with you and figure out what, if anything, is going on inside my noggin.
You've summed that up very well. I mean, the one thing that we've experienced, as you know, that we've watched a variety of people, how people get used to the probability of being hit.
Yep.
I mean, that's an entirely different psychological conversation from there. By and large, one thing that's fascinated me, and the reason why we've moved into this, or I've moved into this thesis, this PhD work, is that what goes through somebody's mind when that ball clicks into the machine, or as that person's starting to engage in their run-up, or even if they're at the stage of the gather, what is going through that person's mind about the decision-making process that they're going to do? Judgment versus decision-making. What goes through our minds? What do we do? Probably more pertinent, what are we not doing? Professionals focus on every single delivery. Now, I think it's fair to say for amateurs all over we don't. We're thinking about, from your perspective, Dan, you're thinking about the cameras are in the right place. What content are you going to do next? Is everybody behaving themselves? Are the batteries charged? Am I not going to smash the camera down at the other end? And then the very last thing that's coming into your head when you're playing is batting.
As well, the other thing as well that I think is kind of important is that although this is obviously my journey, I'm kind of hopeful that people will watch through these videos and they'll go, okay, fine, I don't have to worry about whether the SD cards are clean. But actually there was a nugget there that I can take away to use for my own game.
But what I'm curious about with you is you also came to cricket very late, didn't you? You didn't start it as a youngster like a lot of people out there do. What was it that brought you into the sport itself?
It was just the 2005 Ashes. So that was it. I was meant to be revising at the time, and I mean it's a really good idea to put cricket on free-to-air TV. So I was watching that instead of revising, which might explain why I'm making cricket videos now and not kind of some high-paid businessman, banker type, whatever, I don't know. But yeah, that was essentially it. It was probably more the romance of the sport and the characters in it and the occasion rather than the actual kind of basic bat on ball bowling type thing. I think it must have been as much of the personalities of Shane Warne and Freddie and Ricky Ponting and Trescothick Strauss.
And had you played many sports previous to that?
I'd played a lot of basketball, so that was probably the only team sport that I really played when I was growing up. I did a bit of football, but not much. I swam a lot, so very individual, and I used to race go-karts quite a lot as well. So again, a very individual sport.
And you've mentioned it, you've gone straight in with the word batting. Was the batting the side that appealed to you most rather than the bowling side of things?
I think it probably was. I think the batting side of it's always been the sexy side, isn't it? Although when I started, because I think in terms of the risk as a newcomer you have on the game is a lot more reduced when you just bowl, if that makes sense.
I completely agree, yeah.
When I first started playing, it was a case of bowling.
Again, you were a different age, so a lot of people, like you say, you're 16, 17 now, you've been going for about 10 years?
Yeah, probably
10 years,
just over,
10 years, something like that, 2005, but probably playing actual regular games, maybe 10, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
What did you hope to achieve? Or did you not think?
I think achieve is probably the wrong word. I think it was probably the opposite to that. I think it was almost the fear of failure, if that makes sense.
And do you still, even to this day, even when you play now, depending on where you bat, obviously, I'm an opening batsman, so I find it much easier to walk in from ball one. I've trained my mind to cope with that. From your perspective, have you managed to deal with the nerves?
I think the nerves have gone with the bat, but I think that's ultimately because I've had the privilege of facing people like Adil Rashid, for example. And actually, with all due respect to James or to Fred or to whoever, who are they? And I know that sounds really dismissive and really arrogant, but so I don't get nervous anymore. But the thing that I really struggle with is switching on. And the thing that kind of I think about afterwards is when I walk off or sit down or have taken my pads off, I have no real recollection of what's actually happened.
Just talk to me a little bit about your visualization and your self-talk as you go through. Is self-talk something that you do? I mean, obviously, when you mic'd up, it's handy because you can actually...
It makes the video
makes the video. So, you know, self-talk and talking yourself through a shot or leading up to it, is that something that you do? Do you project in any way?
I'd like to say yes, but I think it's very inconsistent. In an ideal world, and probably when I've played the best, I've been so switched on to what I've been doing and not audibly, but saying to myself, essentially kind of watch the ball is basically what I've kind of just constantly told myself. I try and have a little bit of a routine, if that makes sense. Like I'll try and hit the ground twice with the bat, and then I'll try and take like a slight trigger across onto probably off stump ultimately. But that's very inconsistent. Sometimes I'll hit the ground once. Sometimes I won't trigger. But I don't necessarily think that's a conscious decision as to me only hitting the ground once, if that makes sense. I think when I'm conscious, I've tapped the ground twice. When I'm conscious, I've been saying, watch the ball, and I've made that trigger across. I think it's when I'm unconscious is when it's kind of the...
And how often does that unconsciousness, or when does that unconsciousness, do you find, comes into your batting? So
I would imagine, without being able to say for certain, but it would probably be fatigue. I think it would probably be fatigue. And I think with the summer that I had last year, with all the work that I was doing, all the external factors that were going on in my life at that same time as well, I was, and probably still am to be fair, but incredibly mentally fatigued before I'd even started.
Yes, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it comes in, but it is when you start to feel tired, there is the ingress of more thoughts coming in because your mind, your cognitive processes are being drained because of how tired you are.
Probably, yeah.
And then we're starting to find the errors come in. That's really interesting. I'm sure that's for a lot of people as well. I'm sure that fatigue is as you go into an innings. So just one final point before we transition into it. I want to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, which is a little bit of a bugbear of mine. It's something that I feel that unfortunately in cricket there isn't a huge amount of. You're a very empathetic person anyway, you're a sympathetic person, you're very self-deprecating in the way that you are. I know, having known you for a long time, you have very high emotional intelligence. However, that is not always the way across the board. So how do you cope with things like when you're making your way in the game and actually you're starting to have a little bit of success? How do you deal with the chirp or the comment?
I think when I started, it was something that I really struggled with. As it's gone on, more so now, particularly if it's negative conversation that people are trying to engage with, whether it's from my own teammate. No, to be fair, if it's from my own teammate, then I'm starting to think about kind of a bigger picture, particularly with league cricket. And maybe I'm thinking, maybe I am having a negative impact on the game here. And I do think that's quite a thing. I'd like to think I'm fairly selfless, if that makes sense, when it comes to playing cricket. It's very unlikely that I would bat for 40 overs to score 100 and finish, I don't know, 30 runs short of a target to chase it down, because I've still lost. I want to win a game of cricket. I don't care what my personal thing is. I'd rather win the game. But obviously that's subjective, and potentially I look at it and go, oh, maybe I am having a negative impact on him. Maybe I do need to let somebody else have another go. With opposition, if it's negative, a lot of the time now, 95% of it, I don't even listen to it. I don't even hear it, to be honest with you. However, if it feels like it's a genuine conversation, I'm quite happy to engage.
Brian Lara famously, you never chirped Brian Lara because you just had the complete opposite effect. He would then go on to, the best thing to do with him was to leave him alone and not pay him any attention. And there are a lot of players like that. But I'm just interested that you know, holistically, speaking about the visualization, the fatigue, everything you've got to deal with, the final piece of the puzzle for me is the external influences, how much the emotional intelligence of people around you and your own emotional intelligence affects the decision-making process. So I think we'll end it there. I think it's because we could talk about it forever. Obviously, you know.
Yeah.
The goal here is to get through 40 overs in a match.
Yep.
But to get through in a way that we're comfortable with the way that we're playing. We'll get padded up and let's give it a go.
Let's do it.